We're here at the Chester Street complex, another Friends of the Earth functions on, joined by Philip. Two things though. First of all, let's quickly talk about bees, because that's what's here today, and that's as in bees.
Yeah, it's all bees. I mean, a lot of the worry is about the honeybees and the decline of them, because Europe, worldwide in fact, has been a problem with varroa mite. There's also been certain chemicals, neonicotinoid, insecticides. The Isle of Man, however, is very good because we've been checking over varroa mite, neonicotinoid insecticides. It's not so much of a problem because we don't think it's being brought into the island. But there is still the changing weather patterns, and the bees are suffering because they're not getting out to feed. So I've heard recently of a beekeeper who lost all his colonies, 10 hives, and he thinks it's because of the summer's wet, horrible, really cold winters, and they died despite trying to feed them over the winter.
I just say with this disease, the Isle of Man's actually up on the other places. In fact,
Yeah.
I've done stories about them being sent worldwide in the post to help out to sort of repopulate other areas. So that's a good news story. Anyway, so that's going on here today.
Yeah.
The real thing, I suppose, that is probably getting you a bit hot under the collar would be the news that, surprise, surprise, the 15-15 sort of resolution by government on renewables isn't going to be met. No. Your reaction to that?
Very disappointed. It's been covered well in the media, this, but it's we've worked for a couple of years, and bear in mind, Isle of Man Friends, it's all voluntary. We've been going to schools, we've been doing institutions, talking to them about wind farms onshore, trying to meet this target. It's, they are very viable, an onshore wind farm. It's the best developed technology, 20 years going. A wind developer will build the wind farm. It's not going to cost us anything. There'll be a slight increase, maybe 1p a unit increase on electricity prices, but it gets us off fossil fuels, or helps to get us off some fossil fuels and reduce our CO2 emissions.
I mean, I think the points. Well, no, I'm more interested about the way that you're reacting to the government not doing anything now for that deadline. I mean, they've got civil servants employed whose job was to try and work this out, and we have both seen that there's been not anything on the runway as such towards that target, and now they've had to basically, well, Mr. Gordon said, hands up, we're not going to hit it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they did meet with some wind developers, but it just doesn't. You're right. It hasn't been moved on. There doesn't seem to be much enthusiasm for it to go ahead, and it's been left and left and left. And now they're saying there's no way they can meet it. Although, in fairness to Minister Gordon, he said he thinks we could do it in 2 years if there was the political will.
Well, everyone voted for it, did they not? That resolution.
It was unanimous. Yeah. May 2010, it was a unanimous vote.
So what pressure are you going to put on now?
We're going to continue to pressure for a low-carbon form of electricity production. And yes, the wind farm is still on the books with us. We're not going to give up on it.
So onshore?
Onshore, yeah. Onshore wind farm, yeah. We're still going to keep
highly controversial. I mean, there are going to be people you wouldn't want it in your backyard, would you?
I live in Hutchinson Square. It wouldn't be a problem.
My point is, you wouldn't want it in your backyard.
No, seriously, no. In all fairness, wind farms, they are put up in the UK, and people get used to them. I mean, they're not ugly. Some people don't see them.
Would you want it in your backyard?
Well, I'm going to say yes.
Right.
I'm going to say yes. Seriously, it's not a problem to me. And they say to communities that have had them put up in the UK, they get used to the wind farms. And quite often there's community schemes where the people get the benefit of having the wind farm by cheaper electricity. It's fed back, or they pay for community halls. They actually have policies.
But in the days of consultation, everything goes to consultation. I mean, the harbours and that sort of thing. You've got one marina. I mean, Ramsey years ago rejected it. But these days people don't want change. They don't want anything in their back garden that may alter their views, right?
Yeah. Well, the Isle of Man is a very beautiful place. But it won't be such a beautiful place if it's ravaged by climate change due to the fact that we've got uncontrollable CO2 emissions because we're making no effort. People say, why should the Isle of Man make any difference because we're so small? Everybody should be cutting back on the CO2 emissions. You have got renewables on your roof. I mean, people are trying to do it. And that's another thing. Microgeneration isn't encouraged by the MEA, just to pick up on another thing, where the government could help to promote this, but it's so expensive to put net metering in, it just doesn't benefit anybody. There's no incentive for people to try and reduce their CO2 emissions by producing their own electricity on a small scale.
Well, the future is people doing more of their own microgeneration, isn't it?
Yeah, there is. I mean, George Fincher and the Greens puts up small turbines, 2.5 kilowatt, 6 kilowatt. But again, let's get rid of this net metering charge, which penalises people for putting this stuff up. It's not a cheap form of doing it, but they want to make the effort. They want to do something for the good. It is a form of producing low CO2. And one other thing, On to the credit of the government, the offshore turbines in our territorial seas is a good idea. You know, as long as it's not in a shipping lane. You know, that is a way of us earning revenue. Doesn't cut our CO2 emissions.